Well, hey, and welcome back. I hope you guys are enjoying some of the cooler weather here as the seasons change and things are looking a little bit different as we're anticipating the later parts of fall and some of the holiday season. I know it kind of gets me in the mood to be cozy and up in the house and all that kind of stuff. We're here at the end of chapter 3, and what we're doing this week is we're looking at what Paul says are two roles of the church that they are to fulfill. We've seen how Paul prioritizes the role of leaders in the church and how they help the church aim at love. And now we're looking at the two roles of the church and how they keep us aimed at love. The first one we looked at on Tuesday was that the church is the household of God. And we saw that it's a safe place and that it's a family and it's the dwelling place of God. And today we're going to look at how the church is a pillar and buttress of the truth. Read with me chapter 3, starting at verse 15. Paul says, "If I delay, you may know how one ought to behave in the household of God, which is the church of the living God, a pillar and buttress of the truth." Paul's saying that the church is a pillar and buttress of the truth. It is the place where truth is lifted high, and it's also the foundation of truth. This is what the church is. This is the role of the church in our world and in our lives. And as we're digging into these verses, I think it's important to try to understand what Paul is saying whenever he is talking about the truth. In the New Testament, one of the main definitions of truth is Scripture, of the truths of Scripture that God has spoken, and His words and His revelation to us are really important for how we should live our lives and operate in this world. And he says that the church is the one that is the foundation for that. That's what he means by buttress of truth, that the church is the grounds for truth. It's the place where truth begins. But then he also says that the church is a pillar. So it's not just the foundation horizontally, but it's also the pillar. It's the place where truth is lifted high. It's where we show that what God prioritizes is truth. And I understand truth is something that can be kind of tricky to get at in our world. Sometimes we hear the way that truth is unpacked, and the way that people talk about truth is that what's true for you is true for me. And that's absolutely contrary to what Scripture gives us is the grounds of truth. We know from Scripture that truth is something that is objectively true, something that is always and eternally true, and the church should be the place where that's prioritized. And that's challenging in our world. I understand that there are lots of different things, even in our news, in our media, in our culture, especially in an election season, that people are really digging at what is true and what is not, and people are making claims that what is not true is actually true, and this makes for a really confusing culture and a really confusing time for us. Yet the church should be the place that's not confused about what is true. And central to all of that, central to what we believe is truth, is the gospel of Jesus. That Jesus came as a man, but he was also God himself in his fullness, come to earth to live a perfect life that we should have lived, to model what it is to walk in righteousness. And yet, even walking this life perfectly, went to the cross. He was killed. He was murdered, even though he was completely righteous. He was murdered, and that crucifixion actually is the grounds for our faith. That crucifixion is effective. It actually transferred Jesus' righteousness to us and put our sin on him. This is the centrality of the gospel. And so Paul ends chapter 3 with an incredible, probably a song or a hymn that was sung in the early church. And I just want to read it with you guys today. This is the truth of the gospel. He says in verse 16, "Great indeed we confess, as the church, is the mystery of godliness. He, Jesus, was manifested in the flesh, vindicated by the Spirit, seen by angels, proclaimed among the nations, believed on in the world, and taken up in glory." Listen, all of truth centers around who Jesus is. If we don't get what we believe about Jesus right, if we don't understand the role of his life and his death and resurrection in this world, then we're going to have a really hard time maintaining truth in the church. And the church should be a place that is a pillar and a buttress for the truth. That's how the church aims at love. That's how we stay focused on the right things, is being the grounds and the buttress of the truth and the pillar that upholds and lifts high the truth of Jesus.